Severe weather alert.
Tropical Cyclone Debbie is still a Category 2 system, but is continuing to weaken as it moves further inland. Now, this is what it looked like on the ground a little bit earlier today in eastern parts of central Queensland. Now, this is around the Whitsundays region, in the Airlie Beach region, where you can see just how intense conditions were. Wind gusts reached as high as 263 kilometers an hour at Hamilton Island. And during this wind gust, it actually tipped the temperature over to 39 degrees at Hamilton Island because those winds were blowing from a westerly direction. That is the hottest day on record for Hamilton Island. But now back to these images here. You can just see how hazardous the coast was today as well, and many people still spending time in evacuation shelters as we speak. The threat's still not over, still a Category 2 system. It has weakened substantially since making landfall just after midday today, right around that Airlie Beach and Bowen region of Queensland. Let's take a look underneath that radar. Showers are still continuing, and it is getting very heavy. And now the focus is gradually beginning to turn to the threat of river flooding. Now, we do have the risk of damaging to destructive wind gusts that are particularly rolling through the Collinsville region right now. And Moranbah recently recorded a gust of 100 kilometers an hour. That was at 7:30 p.m. local time. So gales are extending that far inland and, of course, around the Proserpine region as well. But now that the winds are beginning to dissipate to a degree, rather than the wide-scale destructive winds, we are now facing the threat of very heavy rainfall. This is the cyclone's eye, and it moved right over the land just around that Airlie Beach region, just to the south of the Bowen region, and it dissipated rapidly. But you can see Bowen, one of the worst affected regions there, 202 millimeters, well, 203 millimeters since 9 a.m. this morning. Hamilton Island, a whole bunch of stats today, but now nearly 100 millimeters since 9 a.m. this morning. Mackay Airport, 65, and we are still beginning to see rainfall totals piling up, and this rain is now beginning to trigger flooding, with a major flood warning now out for the Pioneer and the Don River. Now, the Pioneer River is the river that actually goes right through the Mackay region, and we are now going to high tide at Mackay. So the combination of a tidal surge tonight, the high tide, which is going to be occurring somewhere just past midnight, it looks like, and the river levels rising through that area as well, could lead to at least minor flooding in the Mackay area tonight. But really, the Bowen region is on alert now, because the Bowen pump station is now exceeded moderate flood levels and is approaching major flood levels tonight. There are reports that parts of Bowen are, in fact, right now inundated. Let's take a look at some of the strongest gusts. Of course, these occurred earlier today. Mackay 96, it has now dropped steadily over there to 50 to 65 kilometer an hour wind gusts. But Proserpine still in gale force winds, not as strong as those destructive winds we saw earlier today. The warning is still out between St. Lawrence and Ayr, and it doesn't include places like Pentland anymore. It excludes that region, but it does include Mount Coolon and the Moranbah region, and there's where that gale boundary essentially is right now. It is developing Proserpine and down to Moranbah and offshore as well at the Hamilton Island. We are still getting gale force winds there, but no longer destructive winds at Hamilton Island. It is going to continue to weaken overnight. Tropical Cyclone Debbie potentially into a Category 1 and then a tropical low as we go into Wednesday. Now, it is critical that when we talk about categories, we really refer to the maximum wind gust, and we really don't refer to how heavy the rain is going to be, and it is severe flash flooding is continuing to be a risk in the next 12 to 24 hours across many parts of this region, really extending across the warning area, but developing further inland. Even as a Category 2 system, we will see some heavy rain leading to flash flooding. And let's zoom up a little bit more exploded view here of that system continuing to track south and deplete into a tropical low. But those areas of heavy rain will continue for quite some time. They'll shift further south And you can see the Gladstone region beginning to pick up those totals on Thursday. But the point I also want to make is that this period of heavy rain is also going to really affect how quickly emergency services respond to those areas that are being affected by the weather right now, because the heavy rain in places like Bowen and also around the Mackay area have the potential to last another 12 to 24 hours and even longer than that, depending on how heavy it gets. The forecast range shows that we still have around 200 to even 400 millimeters possible, and widespread totals between 100 millimeters and above across many catchments in Queensland. A flood watch still out between Ayr and right down past the border into the northern regions of New South Wales, northern rivers of New South Wales, and the upper McIntyre Valley. And as I was saying, we now have major flood warnings out for the Don River as well as the Pioneer River, and Bowen is particularly at risk, so just please be alert. These floodwaters are very, very quick moving. In fact, since midday, we've seen 5-meter rises in some parts of the Pioneer River, most of them on the ranges, but that is exceptionally fast moving and exceptionally high rising rivers. And of course, now we also have the threat of coastal inundation. We are beginning to approach the high tide in some regions. The high tide is going to be coming in much later tonight, but rivers are rising at the same time the high tide is coming up. So this has the potential to result in coastal inundation, particularly in those regions that are close to estuaries or even on the adjacent banks of rivers and coastal regions.